Released in 1992, Ultima Underworld wasn't just another dungeon crawler. Games like Dungeon Master and Eye the Beholder had already set the standard, but Ultima Underworld was different. It was a groundbreaking game that was both innovative and influential. It was a standalone title that was nominally part of the long-running Ultima series, and its protagonist was the Avatar, the same hero from the other Ultima games. And this dungeon crawler wasn't just a series of corridors. It was a breathing, simulated world. You weren't just a character on a grid. You were a person navigating a complex environment. It's true that if you look at Ultima Underworld today, the graphics are undeniably dated. The world is built with blocky polygons and low-resolution textures. The enemies are simple sprites that can feel a bit flat in this 3D space. But don't let that hold you back, because to judge the game on its visual fidelity by today's standards is to miss the point entirely. Because these simple graphics were the very foundation of its revolution. They were the engine that powered a level of immersion and freedom that no other game could match at the time. The blocky walls and simple textures weren't a limitation, they were a canvas for your imagination. The magic of Ultima Underworld isn't in its photorealism, but in the way it uses these basic tools to create a world that feels alive. And the atmosphere was elevated even further by the music. While you were exploring, subtle mystical themes would almost be constantly playing, setting a mood of quiet awe and a feeling of constant isolation. But the moment you entered a battle, that music would instantly give way to a more urgent and percussive combat track. This was a sophisticated use of sound for its time, where the game's music didn't just play over the experience, it actively responded to it. This design helped amplify the feeling of a dangerous environment. So, the premise of the game: rescue the princess in distress. Well, this angle might have been slightly naff, but it was just a setup. The lore of the place itself was anything but. The Stygian Abyss wasn't a generic dungeon. It was a failed utopian colony, founded by a man known as Sir Cabarrus. Cabarrus was a visionary figure who sought to create a true utopia. He founded a colony deep within the Stygian Abyss with the grand ambition of uniting all the diverse races under one banner. His dream was to create a society that transcended the separate virtues of the Ultima series and instead embodied all 8 of them in perfect harmony. To achieve this ambitious goal, Cabarrus planned to use a set of 8 magical artifacts, each imbued with one of the 8 virtues: honesty, compassion, valor, justice, sacrifice, honor, spirituality, and humility. He intended to give one artifact to each of the different factions, such as the humans, goblins, and trolls, as a symbol of their shared commitment to peace and coexistence. However, Cabarrus's dream died with him. He passed away before he could distribute the artifacts, and left no instructions for how to proceed. The colony's fragile peace shattered. The factions turned on each other, and the utopian experiment collapsed into a state of civil war and anarchy, leaving the powerful, virtue-imbued artifacts lost and scattered throughout the hostile abyss. And it's this backstory that made every faction more than just an enemy to be killed. It made them part of a tragic, captivating history. This is the crucial point. The environment was the story. The lore wasn't dumped on you in a cutscene. You experienced it. You learned about the failed utopia by walking through its ruined halls, seeing the evidence of its collapse in the broken walls and the hostile inhabitants. Every section of the abyss had a history for you, the player, to piece together the story from what was left behind. The layout of a level, the placement of an item, the hostility of a faction, it all spoke of a past that had gone horribly wrong. Now, the DNA of Ultima Underworld, its influence can be seen in later titles from its developers at Looking Glass Studios, including, of course, Underworld 2. Two of the most direct spiritual successors I can think of are System Shock, with its legendary descendant BioShock. The link between these games is clear. They are both immersive sims. System Shock, made by many of the same developers at Looking Glass, took this formula into a sci-fi setting. It kept the core principles of isolation and emergent gameplay, but added a more horror-orientated tone and a strong emphasis on environmental storytelling. The player was alone on a space station, piecing together the story through audio logs and a hostile AI named Shodan. Years later, Irrational Games, led by some of the same creative minds, released BioShock. The influence of Underworld is undeniable. The setting of Rapture is a masterclass in isolated environmental storytelling. You are dropped into a failed utopia, left to discover its tragic history through scattered audio diaries. And also pertinent of note is the French RPG Arx Fatalis. It was originally conceived as a true Ultima Underworld 3, but the developers were unable to get the licensing rights from Electronic Arts. They instead created their own new intellectual property, and the resulting game is an explicit love letter to Ultima Underworld's style of first-person dungeon crawling. Worth a look. The gaming landscape has changed dramatically. While many modern games are often somewhat linear or hand-holding, designed to be highly accessible to a broad audience, Ultima Underworld was the complete opposite. It was a game that respected the player's intelligence. When we heard the original creators were making a new Underworld game, hopes soared. Underworld Ascendant was pitched as a spiritual successor, a new trip into the Stygian abyss. But for many, that dream quickly turned into a very big disappointment. While Ascendant had the same creative DNA, it ultimately proved that a name and a few key people aren't enough to capture a game's soul. And while the original was a true sandbox that respected your intelligence, allowing you to solve problems in a number of ways, Ascendant's execution was fundamentally flawed. Its buggy physics and repetitive quests often made creative solutions feel impossible. Underworld Ascendant had the surface-level ideas, but it lacked the core elements, the seamless world, the sense of awe, and the deep, believable lore that made Ultima Underworld a true legend. I wish for something that feels like a true Ultima Underworld 3. And for it to truly capture that magic, it needs to be set back in the Stygian abyss, or at least a place like it, a singular interconnected dungeon with a tragic history that feels like a living, breathing character in itself. A game that takes the original's groundbreaking design and updates it for a new generation, without losing the soul that made us all fall in love with it in the first place.